If you are lying in bed right now, waiting for something slow and steady to guide you towards sleep, then you are in the right place. Tonight, we will wander back in time, far back, to the medieval world. Do not worry, there will be no sharp battles, no roaring knights charging across the field. Instead, we will take the slower road. We will talk about the ordinary people of that time, the peasants who worked the soil, who lived under the rule of lords and kings, but who spent their days in rhythms so steady that they might lull you into dreams. Close your eyes and imagine. The year is somewhere in the 13th century. Europe is not yet bustling with cities like today. Instead, most of the land is covered with fields, forests, and small villages. A village is not large, perhaps a cluster of a few dozen houses built with wooden beams, straw roofs, and mud walls. The smoke from cooking fires rises into the gray air. Chickens wander freely in the dirt path that runs through the center of the settlement. Dogs bark lazily, and children's laughter echoes faintly, though even their games are simple. Sticks and stones, rolling hoops, chasing each other in circles. The life of the medieval peasant was not fast. It was slow, sometimes painfully so. But in that slowness, there was a rhythm, a kind of heartbeat of the land itself. Each morning began not with alarm clocks, but with the sound of roosters crowing, with the light of dawn slipping through cracks in wooden shutters. The farmer would rise, stretch his arms stiff from the night's chill, and step outside into the misty air. The smell of damp earth was always present. The people of this time lived so close to the soil that every breath seemed tied to it. Their bread came from the grain they planted, their milk from the cow tied near the house, their warmth from the wood they gathered in summer and burned in winter. It was a circle repeated year after year, slow and steady. Perhaps as you listen, you too can feel that same rhythm, steady enough to calm your restless thoughts. Walking into the village, you would notice the church first. It was not a grand cathedral, no, but a modest stone building, its bell tower not very high. Yet for the villagers, it was the center of life. Every Sunday, and often in between, people gathered there. The priest spoke in Latin, words most peasants could not understand, but they listened anyway. They listened not because of the meaning, but because of the sound, the steady chanting, the rhythm of prayer that washed over them like waves. It was, in its own way, another lullaby of the medieval world. Around the church, you would see cottages clustered close together for safety. The walls were made of wattle and daub, sticks woven together and covered in clay. The roofs were thatched with straw, and if you looked closely, you might see small birds nesting there, adding their soft chirps to the quiet atmosphere. Everywhere the earth stretched out. Beyond the cottages lay fields carefully divided. Strips of land belonged to each family, but they were farmed in common patterns. Some fields for wheat, some for barley, others left fallow to rest. The peasants did not rush their farming. They followed the seasons, as their fathers had, and their fathers before them, planting, waiting, harvesting, over and over again. If you pause here in this vision of the past, you might hear the sound of a distant hammer, perhaps someone mending a plow. You might hear the low moo of a cow, or the gentle bleating of sheep. These were not sharp sounds, not loud. They were the sounds of a life that moved slowly, like water flowing down a quiet stream. And if you listen longer, you might realize This is not a story of war or kings. It is a story of the unnoticed, of lives that were simple and repetitive. But sometimes it is in the repetition, in the quiet turning of days, that the heart finds peace. So tonight, as you drift, remember the peasants of medieval Europe. They did not have the rush of our world, the constant ticking of clocks, the screens that glow even at night. They had only the steady rhythm of land and sky. And perhaps as you think of them, your own breath will slow, your own heart will settle, and sleep will come more easily. When morning had fully settled over the medieval village, the day's true rhythm began. Life was not guided by watches or clocks. Instead, it was the sun and the seasons that measured time. Imagine, if you will, the quiet shuffle of feet as peasants moved toward the fields. There was no hurry. There rarely was. Work was steady, yes, but not rushed in the way we think of work today. The men carried tools, wooden plows with iron tips, heavy hoes and sickles for cutting grain. These were not shiny or new. Tools were patched, mended, and used until they could no longer serve. A plow might be older than the man who pulled it. Yet with patience, the earth was turned, slowly, row by row, strip by strip. Women, too, joined the work. Some carried baskets, filled with seeds to scatter across the tilled earth. Others brought younger children with them, tying babies onto their backs or setting them down on blankets while they weeded. The older children ran between the rows, half working, half playing. Their laughter mixed with the soft rustle of grain, with the cawing of crows circling above. Farming was hard, but it was not fast. Each action was repeated again and again, the same movement across the same soil. The swing of the hoe, the scattering of seed, the pulling of weeds, step after step, hour after hour. In this rhythm, there was something steady, almost like breathing. If you think of it now, perhaps you can imagine the gentle pace, and with it your own body might feel a little more at ease. The seasons shaped everything. In spring, fields were sown. In summer, weeds were pulled and animals tended. In autumn, the harvest came, with carts full of golden sheaves of wheat and barley, heavy loads carried slowly back to the village. Winter was quieter, a time of mending clothes, repairing tools, and waiting for the sun to return. Life was a circle, not a line. It repeated again and again, each year blending into the next, so that time itself felt slower, almost timeless. If you were to stand at the edge of the field, you would see men walking steadily behind oxen, their feet sinking into soft earth. You would see women bending low, gathering herbs or collecting firewood. The sound of a distant church bell might float over the land, marking the hour for prayer. But even the bell was not urgent. It was a soft reminder, like a voice calling from far away, steady and patient. At midday, the peasants paused. They sat together on the grass, pulling out simple meals, bread, cheese, maybe a little onion or salted fish if fortune allowed. There were no feasts here, only the quiet chewing of bread baked in clay ovens, the taste of grain that came from the very soil beneath their feet. They drank from wooden cups, often ale or weak beer, for water was not always safe. Between bites, they spoke in low tones, stories about the weather, about the harvest, about the small matters of village life. Nothing rushed, nothing urgent, After resting, they returned to the fields. Work stretched until the evening light softened. Then, slowly, tools were gathered, animals were led back, and families returned to their cottages. The smell of smoke rose again as fires were lit for supper. Children grew sleepy. Dogs curled near doorways. Chickens clucked softly as they settled for the night. And so the rhythm ended, only to begin again the next day. Nothing was fast, nothing was loud. It was the kind of life that might feel heavy if you lived it, but from a distance it feels like a long lullaby, each day repeating in gentle tones. Perhaps, as you think of this, you can feel that same slow rhythm, guiding you toward rest. When the peasants returned from the fields, their homes welcomed them with a simplicity we might find unusual today. The medieval cottage was small, one room, sometimes two if fortune allowed. Walls of wattle and daub held in the warmth of the fire, though smoke often lingered, clinging to clothes and hair, for chimneys were rare. The roof of thatch kept out the rain, though not always perfectly, and in heavy storms the sound of dripping water could be heard at night. Step inside, and you would first notice the hearth. It was the heart of the cottage, not only for cooking, but for warmth and light. A fire burned there almost constantly, its glow softening the rough wooden beams. Pots of iron or clay hung above it, filled with stews that bubbled slowly, the smell of onions, beans, and cabbage filling the air. Meat was rare, usually reserved for feast days, so the peasants lived on what the land gave: grains, vegetables, milk, and sometimes eggs. The furniture was simple. A heavy wooden table stood in the center, worn smooth by countless meals and hands resting upon it. Benches, not chairs, for chairs were luxuries. In one corner, a bed of straw, sometimes shared by the whole family, lay beneath rough wool blankets. The straw was changed only when it grew too damp or dirty, so the bedding was not soft, but it was enough to rest tired bodies after a day of labor. Light came not from lamps or electricity, but from the fire itself, and from small tallow candles, smoky and dim. Shadows moved slowly along the walls, stretching and shrinking as the flames flickered. In the evenings, after supper, families sat together in this dim light. They mended clothes, carved wooden spoons, or listened to stories told by the older ones. Stories of saints, of strange creatures in the forest, or of faraway kings and battles they would never see. The words filled the quiet, just as your mind now fills with these images, slow and steady. Children played even in the evenings. Their games were simple. A few stones, a stick, or a piece of cloth could become toys. They laughed, though not loudly, for the day's work had tired everyone. The rhythm of play faded into yawns, and soon the children curled up on straw beds, their breathing soft and steady. The peasants did not own much: a pot, a pan, a few wooden bowls, some tools, maybe a chest for clothing. But what they had, they used carefully. Nothing was wasted. A broken spoon could be mended. A worn-out garment could be patched and worn again. Life was not about abundance, but about making do, day after day, year after year. At night, when silence filled the cottage, the outside world seemed far away. The crackle of the fire, the faint rustle of straw, the occasional bark of a dog in the distance, these were the sounds of medieval sleep. Above, the thatched roof held the night sky at bay, but through small cracks, stars might be glimpsed,
steady and timeless, as they had been for countless generations. Imagine lying there, after a day of work, on a straw bed with the fire's glow slowly fading. The air is cool, but not unbearable. The day's rhythm lingers in your body. The planting, the walking, the bending, the eating, the resting. Your eyelids grow heavy, and the village outside grows silent. Sleep comes not with urgency, but with the slow turning of the world. And so the peasant's cottage was not just a shelter, it was a small world, a circle of warmth, food, and family, where each day ended as simply as it began. Perhaps, as you picture this now, you too can feel the quiet of that space, the gentle slowing of thoughts, the comfort of repetition.
Every medieval village, no matter how small, had one building that stood apart from the rest, the church. It was rarely large or grand, but to the villagers it felt like the most important place in their world. Made of stone rather than wood, it seemed more solid, more lasting. While cottages might crumble and fields might change, the church felt eternal, steady, unchanging. As you approach, you notice its walls are rough, its windows narrow, and its bell tower small. The bell itself is not polished, but heavy and worn, yet when it rings, its sound carries across fields and forests. Slow and deep, it tells the villagers when to gather, when to pray, when to mark the hours of the day. Inside, the air is cooler, quieter. The floor is made of simple stone or packed earth. Candles flicker near the altar, their wax dripping slowly, like time itself melting away. The scent of incense, faint but steady, lingers in the air. For the villagers, this was not just a building. It was the heart of their spiritual life, the link between heaven and earth. The priest spoke in Latin. Most peasants did not understand a word of it, yet they listened carefully, heads bowed, as the rhythm of the chants washed over them. The meaning did not matter as much as the sound, the cadence, the sense that something greater than themselves was present. It was a slow ritual, repeated week after week, year after year. In that repetition, there was comfort, just as a lullaby comforts a child. Festivals and holy days were the bright spots of village life. On those days, the churchyard filled with people. Bells rang longer, songs were sung, and the villagers wore their best clothes, simple though they were. There might even be music, flutes, drums, or the strumming of a lute. Children played, adults talked, and for a time the worries of the harvest or the harshness of winter faded away. Yet, even on ordinary days, the church remained a quiet presence. People came to pray for rain or for sun, to give thanks for a birth, to mourn a death. Life began and ended here. Baptisms, marriages, funerals, each moment was marked within these walls. The villagers believed their souls were tied to this place, just as their bodies were tied to the soil. If you sit inside the church now and close your eyes, you might hear the faint echo of chanting, the creak of wooden benches, the soft shuffle of feet across stone. The light falls gently through narrow windows, beams of sunlight catching dust in the air, floating slowly, endlessly. It is quiet, deeply quiet, the kind of quiet that seeps into your bones, that calms the mind and softens the breath. Outside, the world of fields and cottages waits, but here, in this stone building, time feels slower. Every prayer is like a soft whisper carried upward, and every silence feels like a pause between heartbeats. For the medieval villagers, this was the center of meaning, the anchor that steadied their lives.
And so the church was not only a place of worship, it was a rhythm in itself, calling the peasants to pause, to gather, to breathe in unison. Perhaps as you picture it now, you can feel a similar stillness settling around you, a reminder that in the slow patterns of life, there is peace. Though most days in a medieval village were quiet, slow, and filled with the same steady tasks, there was one day that broke the routine: market day. It did not come every day, or even every week in some places, but when it arrived, it was a small spark of life in the long, slow rhythm of peasant living. Imagine the sun rising on such a day. The air carried a different kind of energy, though still soft, still calm. Families woke a little earlier, gathering what they could spare: a basket of eggs, a bundle of onions, perhaps some wool spun during the winter, or a wooden spoon carefully carved. These items were carried in baskets, or tied to the backs of donkeys, or simply balanced on shoulders. The peasants set out slowly, walking the dirt paths that led toward the town square or the open field where stalls would be set up. The market was never noisy in the way our modern markets are. It was livelier, yes, but still simple, still human. Wooden tables held small piles of goods: apples, honey, bread, salted fish, candles, bits of cloth. Merchants from outside the village sometimes arrived, bringing spices or cloth from distant places, though such items were rare and costly. Most people came not to buy luxuries, but to trade what they had for what they lacked. Children loved market days. Their eyes widened at the sight of sweets made from honey, or at brightly dyed ribbons, or even at the sight of strangers, peddlers who had stories of faraway lands. While adults haggled gently over prices, children tugged at sleeves, pointing at toys carved from wood, or little whistles shaped like birds. The market was also a place of news. Villagers learned of happenings in nearby towns, of changes in the lord's castle, of rumors of war far away. News traveled slowly in those days, carried by word of mouth. To hear even a single new story felt exciting, even if it was about something distant and vague. A traveling merchant might say, "In the great city of Paris, they are building a church so tall it will touch the sky." The peasants would nod, listening, though Paris might as well have been a dream to them, far beyond their reach. There was music sometimes. A fiddler or a piper might play, the notes drifting through the air. People clapped, children danced, and for a short while the hardships of life seemed lighter. There was laughter, soft but steady, carrying over the stalls. Yet even market day did not break the slow rhythm entirely. When the goods were traded and the sun began to lower, the villagers returned home. Their baskets were lighter, or perhaps heavier with new things, but their steps were calm. The path back to the village felt familiar, the same earth beneath their feet. At home they placed their new items carefully: a bit of salt, a piece of cloth, perhaps a candle. These small things felt like treasures, adding a little comfort to their simple lives. Supper was eaten as always, around the same wooden table, under the same thatched roof. The fire burned softly, shadows danced along the walls, and soon the market day faded into memory, another stitch in the endless fabric of days. For the peasants, market day was not about wealth or luxury. It was about connection. The chance to see neighbors, to hear stories, to share goods, to feel for a short while part of something larger than their little village. And then, like everything else, it folded back into the quiet rhythm of life, slow and steady, like a lullaby.
In the medieval world, time did not rush forward as it does today. There were no ticking clocks, no calendars hanging on walls. For the peasants, the year was measured by the slow turning of the seasons, by the way the air smelled, by the light of the sun, by the sound of the wind moving through the trees. Each season carried its own rhythm, its own quiet work, its own kind of beauty. Spring was the season of beginnings. After the long sleep of winter, the fields came alive once more. The earth softened, the frost melted, and new shoots of green appeared like whispers of life returning. Villages worked from dawn to dusk, plowing, sowing, mending what the cold had broken. The air smelled of wet soil and wood smoke. Birds returned, their calls echoing over the quiet fields. It was not an easy time. The hunger of winter still lingered, and food stores were low, but hope grew along with the crops. Then came summer, warm and golden. The fields ripened, and the days stretched long. There was work, yes, endless work, weeding, tending animals, cutting hay. But there was also a softness in the evenings. After the heat of the day, families sat outside their cottages, letting the air cool their skin. Children played, dogs wandered, and the sky glowed orange and pink before giving way to stars. In those moments, even the hardest lives felt peaceful. The peasants might not have spoken of happiness in grand words, but they knew contentment when they felt it. A full belly, a safe home, the laughter of loved ones nearby. Autumn came slowly, gently. It was the time of harvest, the season of gratitude and exhaustion. Fields turned gold, and carts rolled slowly back to the village, piled high with wheat and barley. The smell of grain filled the air, warm and earthy. Harvest festivals were held, small but joyful. People danced, sang, and shared food, thanking God and the land for their survival. It was a time of plenty, brief but precious. And then came winter, the season of silence. The fields slept beneath frost and snow. The days were short, the nights long. Work moved indoors, spinning wool, repairing clothes, mending tools. Fires burned low and steady, and the family gathered close for warmth. Outside, the world seemed still, almost asleep. You could hear the creak of frozen branches, the howl of distant wolves, the soft fall of snow on the thatch. Inside the cottage, light flickered on walls, shadows moving slowly. The old told stories while the young listened, their eyes heavy with sleep. The year wound down, like a song fading into silence. Then, in time, spring came again, as it always did. For the medieval peasant, this cycle was life itself. There was no escaping it, no hurrying it. They did not count days, they felt them. The rhythm of the seasons matched the rhythm of their breath. Perhaps, as you think of it now, your own breathing slows, falling into that same ancient pattern, in, out, like the turning of the year. Each season passed into the next, smooth and quiet, and life continued, steady, unbroken, eternal. Beyond the quiet cottages and humble fields, there stood another world, the manor. To the peasants it seemed distant and grand, though it was often only a modest stone hall surrounded by wooden fences. Still, it represented power, order, and the strange balance that kept the village turning. Every village had its lord, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel, always distant. He owned the land, though the peasants were the ones who worked it. The peasants did not think of it as unfair. It was simply the way the world was, as steady and unquestioned as the rising of the sun. They paid rent not with money, but with labor. A few days each week they worked the Lord's fields, plowing, harvesting, tending animals, before returning to their own. It was called the corvée, and it tied them to the soil in a rhythm as old as memory.
The manor itself was both fortress and home. Picture its tall wooden gate, its stone walls weathered by rain. Inside, fires burned in large hearths, and servants moved quietly across the floor. The smell of roasted meat and burning oak drifted through the air. For the villagers, it was a place of mystery, a world apart. Sometimes the Lord would ride through the village on horseback, his cloak bright against the dust, his voice carrying over the sound of hooves. The peasants would bow or step aside, lowering their eyes, yet in truth they rarely saw him closely. Most dealings were with his steward or bailiff, men who collected taxes, inspected fields, or delivered the Lord's commands. The manor was also where justice was done. When disputes arose, over land, over animals, over debts, they were settled in the Lord's hall. The peasants gathered, heads bowed, while the Lord or his steward spoke. There was little argument. The decisions were final. Life moved on, slow and steady, the same as before. For the peasants, the Lord was both protector and burden. He defended the village from raiders, provided order, and maintained the peace, yet his taxes were heavy and his demands constant. Still, rebellion was rare. The people had no vision of freedom, only of duty. Their lives were rooted in the same soil they tilled, and the manor, for all its distance, was part of that same circle. On feast days, when the Lord wished to show generosity, he sometimes held gatherings in the manor courtyard. Barrels of ale were opened, bread was given, music played. For a short while, the peasants shared in a glimpse of luxury. They danced, laughed, and forgot the long weight of work. But when the night ended, they returned home, their feet sore, but their hearts a little lighter. The manor, for all its power, was not untouched by time. Its walls cracked, its fires burned low in winter, and its lords aged just as the peasants did. The difference was only in comfort, not in destiny. Death came to both the same way, quietly, eventually, as all things did. In the stillness of the night, if you stood outside the village and looked toward the manor, you might see its windows glowing faintly with candlelight. Beyond the fields, beyond the sleeping cottages, that small light would flicker like a distant star, a reminder of the strange balance that held their world together. And so the peasants worked, the lords ruled, and the seasons turned. No one rushed, no one expected change. Life went on, slow and deep, like a river moving beneath the fog. Perhaps as you listen, you can feel that same stillness, the sense of an old world breathing softly in the dark, steady and endless. When the sun finally sank below the hills and the last light faded from the fields, the medieval village changed. The day's slow rhythm gave way to something quieter, something softer, and sometimes a little mysterious. There were no streetlights, no glowing windows. Only the moon and the stars lit the world, and when the sky was cloudy, even they disappeared. The village sank into near darkness. The air cooled, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke and earth. Dogs barked once, then fell silent. Chickens rustled in their coops. The sound of the wind brushing the thatched roofs was the only voice left awake. Inside the cottages, families gathered around the last glow of the hearth. The fire burned low now, its orange light flickering over tired faces. The day's work was done. Bellies were full enough, hands were washed, prayers were whispered. The priest had told them that darkness belonged to rest and to God. Children, half asleep, were told small stories in soft voices, not grand tales of heroes and kings, but quiet ones, of kind spirits, wandering saints, and strange happenings in the forest. The peasants' world was full of faith, but also of superstition. They believed the night was a time when unseen things moved freely. Witches, fairies, restless souls, all these lived in the darkness beyond their doors. So the villagers stayed close to their fires. The doors were barred with wooden beams. The hearth was banked to keep glowing through the night, its warmth protecting the sleeping family. The faint red light pulsed like a heartbeat, soft and steady. Yet not everyone slept. A few souls always stayed awake. Shepherds tending animals outside the village, guards watching the manor gate, travelers on lonely roads. For them, night was both beautiful and endless. The stars hung like candles in the sky, and the world felt vast and silent. Sometimes the cry of an owl or the distant howl of a wolf broke that silence, reminding them of the wildness still waiting beyond the fields. For the peasants, night was both comfort and mystery. It brought rest, but it also carried a sense of the unknown. The dark was something to respect. They did not fight it with light as we do today. They accepted it, letting it wash over them like a tide. When sleep came, it was deep, the kind of sleep that only comes after long, hard work, when the body and the earth seem to breathe together. And perhaps, if you close your eyes now, you can imagine that same darkness settling around you. Cool, gentle, quiet. No hum of machines, no glow of screens, only the soft sound of the world resting. The same stars shining above, the same moon that has watched over villages like this for 1,000 years. Somewhere a dog sighs. The wind moves softly through the trees. A single ember glows in the hearth, holding the memory of the day that has passed. And so the medieval night drifts on, silent, patient, endless, until morning comes again.
Winter in the medieval village was not merely a season, it was a test of patience, endurance, and quiet strength. The land, once busy with hands and plows, now slept beneath layers of frost and snow. The fields that had been green with grain were white and still. The trees stood bare, their branches like black lines against the gray sky. Everything slowed down, even time itself. For the peasants, winter was both a hardship and a rest. The days were short, dawn came late, and dusk arrived early. The cold seeped through the walls of their cottages, no matter how tightly the thatch was packed. They huddled close to their fires, feeding the flames with the wood they had gathered in the long summer days. Each log burned was a small comfort, a piece of warmth carefully saved and now slowly spent. The work of the fields was over, but there was always something to do. Men repaired tools, fixed fences, carved handles for hoes and shovels. Women spun wool into thread, mended clothes, baked bread, and tended to the animals. The cows were kept inside, their breath rising like mist in the cold air, their soft lowing echoing through the barn. Chickens roosted close together for warmth. Life drew inward, smaller, quieter. At night, the snow outside reflected the moonlight, turning everything a pale silver. The village seemed to glow softly, as if the earth itself were dreaming. Inside the cottages, children slept beneath layers of rough blankets, and the old told stories by the fire. Stories that had been told 100 winters before. Tales of long-ago nights, of lost kingdoms, of miracles and ghosts.
The voices were low, slow, and steady, weaving through the smoke like threads of comfort. Food was simple but filling, thick stews, bread, and ale. Salted meat from the autumn slaughter hung from beams, and if the year had been kind, there were dried apples or honey left to sweeten the long, cold nights. Each meal was eaten slowly, gratefully. Each mouthful was a small victory against the cold. There were holy days, too. Christmas, Candlemas, and the feasts of the saints. On those days the church bells rang clear through the icy air. The villagers gathered, their breath steaming in the cold, their voices rising together in song. Inside the small stone church, candles burned, their light warm and golden against the winter gray. For a few hours the cold did not matter. They were together, alive, thankful. Outside, snow fell quietly, covering every sound. The world became soft, muffled, peaceful. Even the animals seemed to move more slowly. Time drifted, like flakes of snow floating down from the sky. In those long winter nights, the peasants found something we often lose today: stillness. There was nowhere to go, nothing to hurry toward. The fire burned, the wind whispered, and sleep came easily. The heart of winter was silence, not empty, but full, like a deep breath held by the earth itself. And so they waited, patiently, for the first sign of spring, a bird's call, a patch of thawed soil, a hint of green beneath the melting snow. They knew it would come. It always did. The world would wake again, but for now, it rested. Perhaps as you listen, you can feel that same rest settling into your body. The calm of a world asleep beneath snow, breathing softly, waiting for the dawn.
At last, the year turned again. After the long stillness of winter, the sun began to rise a little earlier. The frost softened. The air carried a faint smell of earth waking up. Somewhere, far away, a bird called, a single bright sound that seemed to break the silence of months. The peasants stirred from their cottages, blinking against the pale light. The snow had melted in patches, leaving behind dark, wet soil. It was not yet spring, not fully, but the promise of it hung in the air. The village stretched, as though it had been asleep and was just beginning to wake up. Men stepped out to check the fields, boots sinking into soft ground. Women opened shutters to let in the light. Smoke began to rise again from the hearths, curling lazily into the cool morning air. Everything felt both familiar and new, the way life always feels when it starts again after a long rest. In the distance, the church bell rang, slow, gentle, calling not for labor or for mourning, but for gathering. Its sound rolled across the fields, deep and calm. The villagers walked together toward it, the rhythm of their steps steady, unhurried. The children ran ahead, laughing softly, their voices like small echoes of spring itself. Inside the church, the candles flickered. The priest spoke, and though the peasants still did not understand his Latin words, they felt the meaning. It was a prayer of renewal, of soil, of soul, of life returning after sleep. They bowed their heads, not because they were told to, but because they understood, in their own quiet way, that everything in the world moves in circles. When the prayers ended, they stepped back outside.
The air was bright, the sky pale blue. The sound of wind moving through the bare trees was soft and steady, like the whisper of an old friend. The village came alive again, not suddenly, not loudly, but slowly, gently, as if it had all the time in the world. Children chased each other through muddy paths. A dog barked and wagged its tail. Someone laughed, a small, real laugh, and it lingered in the air. Life, once again, was beginning. And as the peasants returned to their homes, to their fields, to their endless rhythm of work and rest, the world around them hummed with quiet peace. The land would bloom, the harvest would come, winter would return, and spring would follow. Over and over, the same eternal song. There were no clocks to count the hours, no machines to measure the moments, only the steady beat of the earth itself, and the hearts of those who lived upon it. And if you listen closely now, wherever you are, you might still hear that same rhythm, faint but steady, the sound of distant bells, the wind in the trees, the breath of the world, calm and ancient, still turning beneath the stars. So let it guide you. Let the rhythm slow your thoughts, soften your breathing, and carry you gently into sleep. The village grows quiet again. The hearth burns low. The last smoke fades into the night sky. And all is still. All is calm. All is at rest.